Hey, this is Lemoine, CEO of the Real Estate Made Easy Group. Beautiful day in Marietta, Georgia today. I wanted to take a few moments to talk about the war in Ukraine and how that affects the real estate market. The war is never a good thing overall, right, as a population. But how does that impact the real estate market? How can we anticipate the future results to be? For starters, let's look at past wars and how those have affected the real estate market. The World War II, the Vietnam War, the Korean War, usually that affects the stock market, it affects the interest rates, and so all of that does play into the real estate market. And the bigger the war, the bigger the effect. Personally, the Ukraine war is, it depends, right? Is it going to turn into World War III? Maybe, maybe not. Personally, I don't really think so. Right now, the interest rates are anticipated to be going up. And usually with war, the interest rates actually go down. So I've got some historical facts here. In the 80s, the real estate market took a pretty big plunge. And that was because the interest rates were 18.63% then at the highest. That is crazy, insane. So of course that translated into an 8.7% decrease in the housing market. But then after that, the real estate market bounced back. In 86, it went up 9.1%, just that year alone. 87, up 9.8%. So all the hit that it took, it actually bounced back a few years later. You fast forward to the 90s, the real estate market dropped 6.3% between 1990 and 1995. Then we had the government shutdown, the economy wasn't doing great, the GDP took a hit, and so all of those things are also going to affect the real estate market. As the dot-com bubble burst in the early 2000s, that also translated into a real estate market correction, but still it was on average like 2 or 3% loss per year. Then after that, in 2003 to 2006, the real estate market was skyrocketing. That was during the time of the Desert Storm War when we invaded Iraq. And so even with that, the real estate market was booming. It hit a peak in 2006. Then of course in 2008 there was a major crash, and that was the biggest crash in the real estate market history, when at its peak the market lost 17.1%. But if you bought in 2006, which was the peak of the real estate market, the worst part was in 2008/2009. In 2010 you were whole. That means that the market values bounced back from 2010 to what it was in 2006. Then in 2012, it was kind of stagnant. It was the same price, approximately, no big increase from 2010 to 2012. Now we were above the 2006 numbers. That means if you held on to your house for 6 years, then you survived the worst crash in real estate history. The market in and of itself is pretty resilient. One of the biggest reasons is that real estate is finite. You can't make any more of it. The population is growing, market is not. We're not producing more dirt. We can build up, but we can't build out more than what we already have. We can expand further away from the city, but the amount of land that's closest to us, that's finite. There's no increasing that number. From 2012 up until today, 2022, we've been on the biggest real estate uptrend ever, especially in the last 3 years. We've had double-digit increases. Never in history have we seen that before. And so if you think of all the different industries, how they were affected by COVID, everything shut down. What happened to the real estate market? biggest increase it ever had. Double digit in 2020, double digit in 2021, and we're expected to have double digits in 2022 again. So let's go back to the Ukraine war for a second and see. It really blows out of proportion. That's going to affect the stock market. People are going to be fearful. They're going to want to sell and sit on the sidelines for a little bit. And what that does is it lowers the interest rates. But right now on March 16th, the Fed is expected to increase the interest rates. We're currently somewhere between 4 to 4.25%, which is high compared to what we've seen over the last 2 years. So with that being said, if the interest rates can increase at least another 1 or 2%, and we would still be fine. I mean, in the 1980s, we saw 18.63% at the peak, which is crazy compared to what we're paying right now. Almost 20% of your payment was interest in the 80s, and people were still buying houses and selling houses. So now I'm going to get my friend and mentor on the phone, Sam, who's been transacting real estate for over 40 years, and we're going to get to see what he has to say about the historical market.
Hello, Val.
Hey, Sam, how are you?
I'm doing great.
Awesome. Great. Well, hey, if this is a good time, I'd like to interview you for a little bit.
Okay.
What's your name?
Steve Barton.
Great. And so tell me, Steve, how long have you been in real estate?
Well, I got my license in 1968.
1968? Wow. That I was -12 then.
-12, okay.
Yeah.
And then I got my broker's license in 1970.
Awesome. What was the real estate market like when you got licensed?
You know, I didn't know anything about real estate, and I didn't know if it was good or bad. I just, actually, when I started, I was an engineer at McDonnell Douglas at the time.
Got it.
And I started selling real estate part-time on the weekends and in the evenings sometimes, but mainly on the weekends.
So that was on the tail end of the Korean War.
Yes, it was over with. Yes.
After the war, like, how do you think the war in Korea affected the real estate market?
Well, it had to have an effect on it. I didn't know that. I didn't feel it. I didn't relate the market to the war and what the consequences had on real estate.
So then in the early 80s, the interest rates skyrocketed, right? Going into the 18-19%. How did that affect the market?
It just shut it down. It was hard when you figured out what somebody had to be making, be able to pay a mortgage on a house. The numbers didn't come together. There weren't that many people making that type of money to be able to afford to buy a house at that level.
Tell me, Steve, what do you think made the interest rates go up so much?
Inflation. That was the way the federal government, the Federal Reserve, that was their way of counteracting inflation.
That started in the early 80s, and how long do you think that lasted for?
Well, that high interest rate didn't last very long. A little over a year, I would say, something like that.
What do you think that did to the house prices?
Well, it made the house prices crash. People weren't able to sell their homes, basically.
How long did it take for that to level off, would you say?
It took a couple years.
A couple years?
You know, one of the things I did was have people take over the old mortgages. And I kept moving on even in a difficult time.
Yeah, that's...
work out financing that worked for the buyer and the seller.
That's super creative. So you had them assume the existing mortgage so that they didn't have to get a new mortgage at the crazy high interest rate.
Back in that day, we would never, ever see interest rates at that rate. I thought that would be totally impossible.
I know, crazy, right? And now, like, we're in the 4% and people are screaming bloody murder.
That's right.
In the early 2000s, leading up to 2006, like, that was the peak of the market before the '08 crash. What do you think, in your opinion, drove the market up during that time?
They were throwing money at people. They were just stupid crazy with loans. You know, and that's one of the reasons that caused the '08 crash. It was a joke, you know. They would give you the mirror test. If you could breathe on a mirror and make a fog, you could get a loan.
Yeah. Thanks so much for your time, my friend. I really appreciate you. We'll catch up some more later.
That sounds great.
Take care. Bye. The real estate market is always going to be going up, going to be going down. It's never stagnant, right? And so we've been on such a long upward trend that I think the biggest driver is going to be how the interest rates, much more so than the war in the Ukraine. Unless it becomes World War III and a nuclear war, then we all have way bigger problems, right? But in my opinion, I don't think that's going to happen. People are always going to have babies. People are going to get promoted. They're going to move out of state. Eventually, they're going to become empty nesters. As people make more money, they want to house up. Those things are constant. Those things are always happening. And that's going to create real estate transactions no matter what happens externally. Even when interest rates were at 18%, people were still buying and selling, even though that was happening less. But the average interest rate is 7.2% over the history of mortgages. So we're still way under that, in the low 4% today. So in my opinion, the real estate market is super healthy. We are still going to see a double-digit increase this year. That's going to go into next year, and we're still on the upward trend. Even though we may not be in the high teens of appreciation, we're still in the double digits, and that's going to continue for the foreseeable future, at least through 2022 and probably into most of 2023. And then in 2024, we're going to have some sort of a correction, but it's going to be super small. And when that correction levels out, in my opinion, we will still be well above today's numbers. Do the best that you can with what you've got, and trust people like me to take care of you and make the best deal happen for you. Thanks so much for your time, guys. I really appreciate you, and I look forward to talking to you soon.